What is up, YouTube? This is AmK at Purple Sky 11, and this, I'm very sorry, I don't know what happened. This entirety of this video was meant to be in part 20, and I just watched the video and none of this was in there. Obviously, it was a huge mistake on my part, so I just threw it all together quickly. So this I'm going to call part 20B because this is supposed to go along with the Sports Legacy Institute study. I do have more stuff coming. That's more stuff with the Benoit police files and some other topics related to that I've been researching. So please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There is a link to my Cash App in the description box if you'd like to help support the channel. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into what was left out of part 20. For real, I can't stress that enough because you can call this science all you want, but it's not definitive science. The neuropathological findings were confirmed by other neuropathologists and correlate with recent findings of an increased risk of depression and cognitive impairment in professional football players who have suffered multiple concussions, according to research conducted by Dr. Bales and another SLI founding member. Oh my gosh, this is like one hell of a club. Robert Cantu, MD, Chief of Neurosurgery Service and Director of Sports Medicine at Emerson Hospital in Concord, Massachusetts, and co-director of the Neurologic Sports Injury Center at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. And I want you to understand this word here too, correlate. Correlate means that there's a relationship between these things. Correlation does not indicate cause and effect. It shows there's a relation that as one variable changes, another variable also changes. The point is, correlation does not equal cause and effect. And I'm going to show you more about that also in another video. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is a form of brain damage that is best documented in boxers, but can also occur in athletes who played football, ice hockey, rugby, soccer, or any sport associated with impacts to the head. It can only be confirmed by a post-mortem neuropathological immunohistochemical study. While studies show that as many as 20% of professional boxers show evidence of CTE, there has been little study of CTE in athletes involved in other contact sports. So this sentence is also really important to understand here. Saying that their studies show that as many as 20% of professional boxers show evidence of CTE. 20%, that's a very small percentage when you're talking statistics. See, it's saying that while studies show that as many as 20% show evidence of CTE, there has been little study of CTE in athletes involved in other contact sports. So that's telling you that they have less than 20% for a statistical sample that CTE is in athletes of other contact sports. So when you're looking at this from a clinical perspective and you're looking for data to support your claim, this is the stuff you have to look for. You have to look for the numbers. And sometimes numbers can be hidden behind other numbers, like they did right there. And then you have to do the math to figure out the rest. When they say as many as 20% of professional boxers show evidence of CTE, that also means that there's 80% of professional boxers that do not show evidence of CTE. And yet both are in the same profession. Both take blows to the head. So what is the difference? And I also find the wording very interesting because they say as many as 20% when they could word that as few as 20% of professional boxers, since there's actually fewer percentage who show evidence of CTE than there are that do not. So you see, there's always a spin on it. And they're spinning it in a way that there's as many as because they want it to be sort of alarming, because that way you're likely to be emotionally affected by what they're saying here. And then you're more likely to support the work that they're doing and think it's a good thing that your government tax dollars are going to fund this research into CTE, which may or may not even exist. Or to put it simply, they want you to believe that CTE is a big problem and that Sports Legacy Institute is the answer to that problem. And that's just how they do it. And to be really clear, when I say they, I don't mean Sports Legacy Institute specifically. I haven't looked closely at any of their SEC documents to form a solid opinion on their financial integrity yet. Because all of that is public information, I absolutely have it all. Every 990 form filed by Concussion Legacy Foundation as far back as 2008. So I'm gonna be looking. What I am saying is that in my research experience, I find that more often than not, that's the case. Let's just say the chances of a 501c3 tax-exempt organization being corrupt and shady in one way or another is a higher percentage than the number of professional boxers that Sports Legacy Institute claims show evidence of CTE. And getting back to what I was saying, this one little sentence right here says so much if you really think about it. As many as 20% show evidence means 80% do not. They're hiding numbers. And they do that because they don't want you to see the number. Because if you would, you'd understand that it's less than 20% of athletes other than boxers that they've found any evidence of CTE. And it says here that the reason that it's so low is because little study has been done. There's the hook. That's to make your head say, well, that needs to change. More study is what we need. And here comes our hero, Sports Legacy Institute, with the solution. Just send us your brains, your parents' brains, your children's brains.
Not people. Brains.
Brains only.
Yes.
And again, you can say all you want that I'm defending Benoit. I'm not. I'm taking a clinical look at this. If I were the clinician who was looking at this information because I had to make a decision to put in somebody's medical report, I need to make sure that I'm putting the right thing down. And if you don't look at the facts and the numbers, the overall empirical data, you're not going to get the truth. I think you get my point. I'm not going to keep repeating myself because I do want to get this all out in one video. So it says, according to the examinations, Mr. Benoit's brain exhibited large amounts of abnormal tau protein, manifested as neurofibrillary tangles, or NFTs, and neuropil threads, or NTs. These represent aggregates of abnormal tau protein, which are remnants of the cytoskeleton of the brain cells and their connections. Frequent NFTs and NTs were distributed in all regions of the brain, including the neocortex, the limbic cortex, subcortical ganglia, and brainstem ganglia, accompanied by loss of brain cells. Accumulation of abnormal tau protein in the form of NFTs and NTs in the brain has been confirmed to cause neurodegeneration, cognitive impairment, and dementia. There was no other neuropathological evidence for any chronic or acute disorder to explain his clinical symptoms. So a couple things here. How they say that it was a loss of brain cells. Well, brain cells do regenerate. That has been proven. I know that when I was younger, they would tell us, don't do drugs because it kills your brain cells, and once they're dead, they're dead. That's actually not true. Neuroplasticity is the brain's capacity to continue growing and evolving in response to life experiences. And that does include injuries. The brain is absolutely remarkable. It has the ability to shift functions to different regions of the brain if one region becomes unable to operate that function. Your brain cells do grow back. So just because he exhibited a loss of brain cells, that's not necessarily proof of degeneration of your cognitive functions. Another thing here is there was no other neuropathical evidence for any chronic or acute disorder to explain his clinical symptoms. This makes me laugh because they also state in this same document that their findings are true regardless of any clinical evidence or medical history of proof of brain trauma. So is this junk science? Kind of. And I say kind of because it's based on real things. These tau protein clusters, these neurofibrillary tangles, they are real and they do exist. But they cannot definitively prove that having these tangles causes any kind of degeneration of the brain function or activity, which would translate to any abnormal changes in behavior or thought processes. So let's see, here's another quote. The findings of CTE in Chris Benoit's brain, which are consistent with the previous examinations of athletes who suffered from repeated head traumas, confirm the need for a large-scale study of CTE in athletes who participate in contact sports, said Chris Nowinski, who retired from professional sports after multiple concussions and conceived SLI, a collaboration of doctors and advocates that includes renowned attorney Robert Fitzsimmons, who played an integral role. Now, I want to point out some things in here. We've got this quote here from Chris Nowinski. It says here he retired from professional sports after multiple concussions and conceived Sports Legacy Institute, but it doesn't say what professional sport he retired from. It was wrestling. He was a wrestler with the WWE. What a coincidence. I talked more about that in the previous video to this one, part 20, and it says that it was after multiple concussions that he conceived this SLI. Well, how did he conceive it? What sort of thought processes were going through his head when he created this? Would you still be confident in his research if you were to learn that Nowinski believed dead football players and angels guided him in his discovery of CTE? Something to think about, because I have a video coming about Nowinski, just like I did videos about Dr. Aston and Dr. Sperry. So make sure you subscribe and click that little bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And another thing here, he says the findings of CTE that are consistent with athletes who suffered from repeated head traumas, that it confirms the need for a large-scale study of CTE. Well, isn't that convenient? If you have a company where your business is based on studying CTE, what a boon for you, right? If what you found in Benoit's brain confirms the need for a larger scale study of CTE. I mean, you want to get some grants from the government maybe, right? Some money flowing into your corporation for you to conduct these tests. Chris Nowinski reached out to Benoit's father and suggested this. The police did not look into this. This was all done by third party. And just a reminder, when investigators did look over this packet of information that Sports Legacy provided them, which is exactly what we are looking at right now, their conclusion was that CTE did not explain why the incident at the Benoit residence occurred. So Nowinski's quote goes on here to say, the link between CTE and contact sports is clear. And that's true, there is a clear correlation. But again, correlation does not indicate cause and effect. It does not mean that one causes the other. And this is how science can be tricky, because sometimes words are used interchangeably when they shouldn't be. Nowinski says we need to conduct more research to understand the full spectrum of the disease and raise awareness so parents, coaches, medical staff, and athletic officials know how to respond when athletes, including children, sustain head injuries. Oh, think of the children, right? He says if we apply this knowledge, we believe we can successfully prevent future cases. And I can't disagree with that. That could very well be true. But you cannot definitively say that the CTE causes the behavioral changes. You can't. I can agree you would need more study, more looking into this. You need more evidence. But you can't definitively say it. So again, is this proof? Is this evidence? No. It's giving you a look at a possibility. That's about it. But we have other instances of these CTE fibers in other people who exhibited no changes, no behavioral changes. And that needs to be considered as well. I do have hope that Nowinski is taking into consideration the fact that not all exhibit symptoms, because he says we need to understand the full spectrum of the disease. And that word spectrum indicates to me that there is an understanding that cases can range from mild to severe. And an example I can give for that would be autism spectrum disorders. Not all cases are identical, and there is a wide range of symptoms. This then says a disclaimer here, Sports Legacy Institute is dedicated to studying the effects of concussions and other sports-related brain injuries. Through its efforts, SLI aims to maximize the safety and vitality of all athletes who participate in contact and collision sports around the globe. Ooh, so they're going global here, huh? The designation of the Sports Legacy Institute as a 501c3 nonprofit corporation is in the process of being submitted. Oh shit, so see, you're a tax-free nonprofit organization. Shady. I'm sorry, you've got to look into that. The Sports Legacy Institute relies on donations from concerned parties to fund its work. Relying on donations, just like my little YouTube channel. Which reminds me, if you like what you see and would like to support the channel, there's a link to my Cash App in the description box below. Donations of any amount are welcome and appreciated. And unlike Sports Legacy Institute, which is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, I actually pay taxes on my contribution income. Thank you so much to everyone who has donated. You are what keeps this channel going. And I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I do ask questions. And in my experience, this kind of organization that relies on donations from concerned parties and 501c3, so they're exempt from federal tax laws. In my research experience, I often find these kind of organizations are, number one, very easily corruptible from outside influences because sometimes they're willing to provide the results that a party paying a higher price is looking for. You see what I'm saying? And number two, it's also likely that there's a little money laundering going on there. That being said, I'm not accusing SLI or any board members of any kind of financial indiscretions. All I'm saying is that it's not unheard of for something like that to happen. You're welcome to do your own research into all of this. You don't need to wait for my video. If you hear something that I'm saying in here and you think I am completely ridiculous, look it up. Look for yourself. And don't just read one article or two articles from a mainstream news source. And there's fact checker websites that love to tell you something is partly false. Don't forget that if something is partly false, then you can assume it's also partly true. So don't stop there. Actually really dig. See what you find. Leave a comment below. What did you find? So that was the end of the press report, but then included in this packet that Sports Legacy provided to the Fayette County Sheriff's Department for their investigation, they included this little fact sheet. So this is Sports Legacy's Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy, or CTE, fact sheet. And it's the definition, causes, and consequences of CTE. And it's important to point out that this has been produced by Sports Legacy Institute. So this is their opinion of the definition, causes, and consequences of CTE. And sure, in the above press release, they cited numerous doctors that had a lot of letters behind their names and accolades that they were head of whatever department at whatever hospital. But they were all on the board of directors for this Sports Legacy company. So they all had a combined interest. That's really important to understand. I mean, of course they're all going to say the same thing. So I'm going to try to do a quick read through of these bullet points without stopping all the time to reiterate that this is not factual science. This is just I've pretty much already stated what I think. So definition, causes, and consequences of CTE. We'll tick off these bullet points here. Number 1, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is a form of chronic brain damage which results from repetitive head trauma like concussions sustained from contact sports. The most studied type of CTE is found in boxers and is called dementia pugilistica, or punch-drunk syndrome. And I explain exactly what syndrome means as compared to a disorder or a disease in more detail in part 20. Number 2. CTE can occur in other athletes who play football, ice hockey, rugby, soccer, or any sport with impacts to the head. It's also important to note these little numbers here. They refer to down here in references. So if you're going to be doing your own research, you might want to check these references. And let's see. Number 3, symptoms of CTE may include dementia, major depression, and movement disorders. Remember, they mentioned Parkinsonism as a symptom, and I talked more about that and what that entails in part 20 as well. Was there any evidence that Chris had uncontrollable shaking of his hands or his head, anything like that leading up to this event? I sincerely don't know. I'm asking. If you know of anything, comment below. It says in boxers, symptoms begin anywhere between 6 and 40 years after the start of their boxing careers, with an average onset of about 16 years. Between 6 and 40 years, that's quite a span of time. Plenty of time for another variable to be introduced that could trigger the CTE to go into explosive mode. We don't know. We just don't know. Number 4, affected individuals may also develop poor coordination, slurred speech, loss of balance and intellect, altered memory, and may develop tremors, which are commonly associated with Parkinson's disease. Okay, so there again, was there any evidence leading up to this that Benoit had poor coordination? Was he slurring his speech? I will say in that one voicemail that's in my one video that he left for a friend, his voice does sound a little slurred there. So, see, I'm not defending Benoit. I'm considering all possibilities. Did he have loss of balance? I mean, look at his matches. Wasn't he wrestling right up to this event pretty much, except for the show he missed? And again, not a Benoit fan here, so I don't know all of Benoit's stats. Help me out here. Let me know what you think. So much for me not interjecting all the time, huh? But then it says other symptoms may vary depending on which part of the brain was damaged by the injury. So again, you've got a caveat here that just is like a cop-out. Could be anything, other symptoms. So you can pull anything out of the water and add it to this and claim it's CTE. That's not how science works, or at least it's not how science is supposed to work. Now, moving on to the magnitude of CTE. Number 1, CTE cannot be definitively diagnosed except through post-mortem examination of the brain. However, extensive medical studies and analysis of medical histories of boxers suggest that CTE has been described in these lifelong athletes for more than 70 years. I don't know. He just says here that it cannot be definitively diagnosed except through post-mortem examination, which is true. It's the same with Alzheimer's disease. You have to look into the brain in order to diagnose this definitively. And you can't go digging into somebody's brain while they're alive. It's just, I'm not trying to be gruesome. But then they go on to say, well, however, you have extensive medical studies and analysis of medical histories that suggest it's been there for more than 70 years, but you don't have the evidence of that. Sure, they've been looking at this since 1928, but as you can see, there's only been one case with clinical details. So you're only going by somebody's word of how they felt or somebody else's description of how somebody behaved. You can't make that definitive conclusion without looking into the brain. And in order to look into the brain, you need to do an autopsy. So you can't definitively diagnose CTE while the individual is still alive. Number 2, approximately 20% of professional boxers demonstrate symptoms of CTE. And again, 20% exhibiting symptoms means that 80% do not have symptoms. And of the 20% that do, there is a spectrum of symptoms ranging from mild to severe cases, some of which are mentioned in this study. And if you recall, apparently anyone who's ever had a head injury will develop these tau protein tangles. No clinical verification necessary. And this goes on to say, some studies have suggested that amateur boxers sustain damage to their nervous system. Oh, what? But because their shorter bouts allow fewer blows to the head, and because they must wear head safety equipment, the effects tend to be less severe. So it might not even be damage directly to the brain. It could be damage to the nervous system. And that opens up all kinds of possibilities because the nervous system is rather complex and includes a lot more than just the brain. And that also, in my opinion, makes more sense considering the Parkinson's symptoms, because Parkinson's disease is a nervous system disorder. And number 3, while there are no general statistics available for CTE among other athletes, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, estimate that there are between 1.6 and 3.8 million youth sports concussions a year. Youth. Okay, so we're going after the kids again. Think of the children, am I right? Pulling at your heartstrings here. We've got to catch it in the youth so that we can safeguard their adulthood, right? But should we be doing that if we don't have definitive evidence? Moving on here with some more magnitude of CTE. Football may be responsible for over 1 million head injuries per year in the United States, although a precise number is difficult to determine because most players never report symptoms to a medical professional and simply continue playing. In any given season, around 50% of high school and college players report sustaining concussion-like symptoms after sustaining a blow to the head. So, I don't know. This is players reporting sustaining concussion-like symptoms. This isn't a definitive diagnosis of the player having a concussion. So this works well for this Sports Legacy Institute, that they can claim that any report of a concussion could lead to CTE, and we need to look at that closer. That's a slippery slope, and I mentioned that in part 19. If we want to think that way, that anyone who's ever had a concussion or even just concussion-like symptoms probably has CTE and is a potential powder keg, then we have to be giving a sideways glance to other professionals in these sports, because we don't know, as outsiders looking in at them, we don't know what sort of symptoms they might recognize that they have, but are not saying anything because they want to continue in their career. So we can't have it both ways. We either need to consider that anyone with a concussion could be a danger to somebody else, or we need to consider that there's another factor that contributes to these concussions that causes the person to snap, that it's not just evidence of CTE. So what else could it be? This goes on to say, football players who have sustained a previous concussion are up to 6 times more likely to sustain additional brain injuries. Direct medical costs and indirect costs, such as lost productivity of TBI-related injuries, and TBI stands for traumatic brain injuries, totaled an estimated $60 billion in the United States in the year 2000. And TBI-related injuries, it says, may include both concussions and contusions. The term concussion is used at times interchangeably with the term mild TBI. From there, concussions are further broken down into grades 1, 2, and 3. But again, they're telling you to look at something that they don't have any real definitive evidence as even the cause. Remember, correlations do not indicate cause and effect. And then down here's your references that this place used to come up with these statistics here. And that is it. That's all that's here. I do have another video coming where I take a look at how statistics can be manipulated for a certain outcome. And that one may very well be the next one coming after this, because I think it's really important to stress that this may seem like it's very scientifically based and these guys know exactly what they're talking about, but they really don't. They have an idea, but they may very well be following the wrong trail of information. And that could be problematic. At worst, it could be dangerous. And I'm going to end with this. I did include this at the end of the previous video, part 20, which this is a follow-up to. Nowinski on Twitter says that now the sports industry must acknowledge cause and effect and get to work, because he's saying that this study that he released here, that head impacts are a definitive cause of CTE. And he goes on to say that he collaborated with 13 co-authors from 5 countries, including, and then he has some listed here. And here's the thing about that. On paper, that sounds great. He collaborated with 13 co-authors, 5 different countries, and they all came to the same conclusion, right? And because they all came to the same conclusion, he's claiming that that definitively proves that repetitive head impacts cause CTE. Well, I have a big problem with that, because the names that he has listed here, they're on the board of directors of this Concussion Legacy Foundation. This guy here that he mentions, Adam White, he's the executive director of the UK branch of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Every single one of these people, save 1 or 2, are on the board of directors of Sports Legacy Institute or Concussion Legacy, whatever they're calling themselves now. So they all have the common interest of proving this, because it will only benefit them as far as notoriety, being published in a scientific journal, and for grants from the government, donations, tax-free money. You know, if you want answers, these are the guys that are going to give it to you. But, like I said in the first part of part 20, it's been 15 years. This tweet is dated July 26th of this year. It's been 15 years now since the Benoit crimes. And these guys at the Sports Legacy Institute are still working hard to prove that CTE really exists. And they're trying to say now, Nowinski's like, this is it, no more playing games. Well, I'm no PhD, but I'm smart enough to understand this is not replication and validation. It's not. This is getting your coworkers or friends that you work with to back you up. That's really no more than saying, hey, take our word for it. I don't know about you, but for me, that's just not good enough. And that's all I have for you today. I do still have more stuff coming with the Benoit files and some other stuff related to just researching different topics related to this crime. If you like what you see here and you appreciate the work that I do, if you'd like to contribute to the channel, there's a link in the description box below to my Cash App, and you can make a donation of any amount at that link. Any little bit is greatly appreciated. Feel free to leave any questions and comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you get notified for upcoming videos. This has been AMK at Purple Sky 11, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye!